Hey everybody. This video is going to go over the PowerPoint from the week 6 module on division and classification. All right. One thing to note is that although the chapter in the book sometimes says division and classification, we're going to focus strictly on the classification part of this rhetorical pattern. All right. So classifying then is the process of taking many things and separating them into categories. So we generally classify things in order to better manage them, to better understand them, right? So if you were doing laundry, you might begin by separating the clothing into piles, right? So you might create piles based on the colors of the fabrics, right? So you'd have a pile for whites, a pile for darks, maybe a totally separate pile for reds, depending on if you have a lot of red clothing. So you could do it based on color. You might also do it based on the type of fabric. So you could have a pile for cottons, a pile for polyester, and so on and so forth, right? Okay. Librarians classify books into categories or into groups so that we're better able to find them, right? Fiction, travel, health, romance, science fiction, right? Scientists shed light on the world by classifying all living things into two main groups, or into two main categories, animals and plants. In short, if you are classifying something, you are sorting multiple things into categories based on specific criteria for each category. So for instance, if you look at slide 3, if we are classifying laundry, we're sorting our laundry, you must first decide how you are going to sort the laundry. What are the characteristics of the clothing that are going to help you determine which pile to put each clothing item in? If you are sorting or classifying types of books, you must first decide how you are going to sort the books. What characteristics of books help you determine which section a book belongs in? If you're sorting animals and plants, like the scientists, you must first decide how you're going to sort living things. What characteristics of animals or plants help you decide which group a living thing belongs to? We engage in classification on a pretty regular basis. We don't often think about the criteria, though, at least not consciously. We don't consciously think about the criteria we're using to figure out which category something belongs in. But let's just take movies, for example. You can watch a movie. Even if you don't know anything about the movie to begin with, you don't know how it's classified yet. You could probably sit down and watch it. And based on certain characteristics of the movie, you would be able to figure out what category the movie belongs in, or what genre. So what is it about a movie that makes it a romantic comedy? What is it about a movie that makes it a sci-fi movie? What is it about a movie that makes it an action-adventure movie or a children's movie? The answers to those questions are your criteria for that category. In order for a movie to be considered a romantic comedy, it needs to have most of these elements. In order for a movie to be classified as a science fiction movie, it needs to have enough of these elements. So those elements are your criteria for each category that you're going to use to classify your overall topic, right? So we have some sample paragraphs on slides 4 through 6. The first one is on the 5 stages of grief. The second one is on the diversity of Africa, and the third one is on 3 kinds of dogs. Hopefully you read through those 3 paragraphs, and then there were some questions that needed to be asked. Which paragraph lacks a topic sentence? If you go back and look, the paragraph that needed the topic sentence still was the diversity of Africa. There's nothing mentioned in the first sentence about classifying anything. So we don't know, based on the first sentence, what the paragraph is actually going to be doing. And we need to know that. It's a topic sentence. It needs to be laser focused and tell us exactly what's going to happen in the paragraph. Which sentence in 3 kinds of dogs should be eliminated in the interest of paragraph unity? It's actually the final sentence that needs to be taken care of, because it has nothing to do, the paragraph has nothing to do with potential hazards that city walkers might encounter. The paragraph is solely about how to classify dogs. In which of the 3 parts of Africa discussed in the diversity of Africa, which one needs more specific details? And it's the middle section, the part on the middle part of the continent, right? So they talk about the northern part, the middle part, and the southern part. And they give a lot of examples about the different things going on in the northern part of the continent and a lot of things about the southern part of the continent, but they very briefly just mention the details about the middle of the continent. So we need more supporting details for that section. The next question was, after which sentence in 5 stages of grief are supporting details needed? And it's the section on the bargaining stage. They simply mention the bargaining stage in 1 sentence and then immediately move on to the next stage. But you can't do that. You're offering very specific examples and additional information for each of those 5 stages of grief. So you can't just talk about 1 stage in 1 single sentence and move on. You need just as much supporting examples for that stage as you do the other 4. Which sentence in 3 kinds of dogs contain addition transition words or phrases? So sentence number 2, they use the addition word first, and then in sentence number 5, we have the word second, and then in sentence number 10, the third category, right? So those are the addition words, the transition words that are helping us realize that the author, this is their first point that they're going to talk about, then this is their second, and then this is their third. That way we are clear as we're reading how the ideas have been organized and that we're moving on from one idea to the next. What type of order does 5 stages of grief use to organize its details? Well, this is an interesting paragraph because it uses sequential order, time order, because they're stages. You're not always going to have a classification topic that would be organized by time, but this one was, right? The biggest thing you need to get out of those 3 paragraphs and the questions that we looked at is you need to have a laser-focused topic sentence that not only tells us the specific subject of the paragraph, but in this case, it needs to be clear that the paragraph is going to be classifying that subject, right? You need to have very clearly organized points that you're looking at. That would be your criteria, the categories, right, that you're using to classify. And you need to use those transition words like first, next, in addition to, finally, right, to guide your reader through each section. You need to have enough specific examples for each point that you're looking at in the paragraph. Don't gloss over any of them. Give all of them equal attention, right? Make sure you have a concluding sentence that kind of wraps the whole thing up. So we want to talk more about how to go about classifying a topic. How do you determine what the criteria are going to be, your principles of classification. How do you determine that, and how do you make sure that it's appropriate? Well, the next few slides 10 through, I believe, 15, offer different subjects, right? How we're going to classify them. So for each topic, there's 4 principles of classification, but one of them doesn't belong. So for instance, on slide 10, we've got water. What are our categories of classification going to be? We're going to look at cold, lake, hot, and lukewarm. Well, if you look at those, cold is talking about the temperature of the water. Hot is talking about, excuse me, my phone's ringing. Hot is talking about the temperature of the water, and lukewarm is talking about temperature of water. But lake, that's a type of body of water. Has nothing to do with temperature. So based on the majority of what we have in the list, it seems like we want to talk about the different temperatures of water, how to classify water according to temperature. So we need to get rid of lake, because that just doesn't fit with what we're trying to do here. We could classify water by types of, like, bodies of water, right? We could actually look, what does it take for a body of water to be considered a pond? What does it take for a body of water to be considered a lake or a sea or an ocean, right? We could do that, but that's not what we're doing right now. Right now, we're focusing on how to classify water according to temperature, right? The other example on that slide is household pests, right? So thinking of different household pests, not pets, pests. We've got mice, ants, roaches, and flies. Well, if we look at that list, flies, roaches, and ants are all different types of insects, but mice are not insects. So based on what we have here, it seems like what we're really wanting to focus on is how to classify household pests by insect, right? Let's see, what's another good one to look at. So on slide 11, the second column there, we're going to talk about different types of vacations, right? That's our topic. Our categories that we have so far are summer vacations, holiday vacations, seashore vacations, and weekend vacations. So if we're looking at what we have there, summer vacation, that's a time that you take vacation. A holiday vacation, that's also a specific time where you would take a vacation. And the weekend. A weekend vacation is more about the time of vacation. Seashore is a location. That's where you take a vacation. So based on what we have here, the principle of classification we're using is timing, or when you take a vacation. That's how we're going to categorize vacations, and we're going to describe what it means to take a summer vacation or a holiday vacation or a weekend vacation, right? I don't want to go through all of these, but let's see if there's another good one to kind of look at. Okay, slide 13, we're going to look at wallets, right? So we're going to write about how to classify wallets. We could classify them into leather, into plastic, into stolen, or into fabric, right? But stolen isn't going to work because all the other categories have to do with the material that's used to make the wallet. But a stolen wallet is something totally different. So we wouldn't want to talk about stolen wallets in this paragraph. Take it out. Okay, slide 14. Again, the second column, we've got exercise. So we're going to categorize different types of exercise. So our categories of classification, or our criteria, we've got running as an exercise, swimming as an exercise, gymnastics as an exercise, and fatigue. Well, obviously fatigue doesn't fit in here because the other three categories are different types of activities you can do for exercise. Fatigue is either something that prevents us from exercising or an effect of exercising, but it's not a type of activity you do for exercise. So you got to take that one out. So the whole point of these six slides here with the categories of classification and figuring out what the underlying principle is to just reinforce the idea that whatever you choose your categories to be, they all have to have the same underlying principle of classification. They all have to make sense together, right? So you really got to work on making sure you have that. So the next set of slides focus on a student's journey with their classification paragraph. So Marcus decided that he wanted to write his classification paragraph on dogs, but he wasn't quite sure yet how he wanted to classify them. How was he going to classify dogs? He realized as he was free writing that when he thinks of dogs, he thinks of them as having certain personalities depending on their size. And he knew that it wasn't going to be something that could be applied to all dogs, but he was kind of going for more of a lighthearted, humorous paragraph, so he felt like he could go with it. So he came up with his three categories. There's big dogs, medium-sized dogs, and small dogs, right? Under each category, he came up with as many characteristics as he could think of for each category of dogs. You see his list on slide 17. So for big dogs, he sees them as being calm, friendly, good-natured, dumb, lazy. For medium-sized dogs, he sees them as being more spunky and energetic. They're ready to fight, they're protective, but they're friendly if they know you. And then for small dogs, he sees them as being nervous and trembling, they're noisy and yappy, they're snappy, and they're annoying. So those are the characteristics for each of his categories. Those are his criteria. So if you come across a dog that is noisy and yappy and really annoying, and kind of nervous and shaky, that's probably a small dog, right? Based on his criteria for his category. All right, so he came up with all the characteristics for each of his categories. Then he created an outline to help him decide which ones he was going to use. And then he created a topic sentence for his paragraph. His topic sentence was, dogs seem to fall into three categories. The rest of the paragraph then goes through each of the categories. You can read his first draft on slide 19. Most dogs seem to fall into one of three categories. First, they're the big, dumb, friendly dogs. They give the impression of being sweet but not real bright. One example of this kind of dog is Lucy. She's a golden retriever belonging to a man in my neighborhood. Lucy goes everywhere with Mr. Enriquez. She doesn't even need a leash but just follows him. Dogs like Lucy never bother anybody. She just lies at Mr. Enriquez's feet when he stops to talk to anyone. The guy who runs the corner newsstand I pass every day has a spunky, medium-sized dog. Once the dog knows you, he's friendly and even playful, but he's always on the lookout for a stranger who might mean trouble. For a dog who's not very big, he can make himself look pretty fierce if he wants to. Then there are my least favorite kind of dogs, little nervous yappy ones. My aunt used to have a chihuahua like that. It knew me for 9 years and still went crazy, shaking and yipping at me every time we met. She loved that dog, but I can't imagine why. If I had a dog, it would definitely come from category 1 or 2. All right. So he asked one of his classmates to do a peer review on his first draft. And her comments were, I think you need to make your 3 categories clearer. Your first one is okay, big dogs, which you say are friendly, but categories 2 and 3 aren't stated as clearly. She says it's also distracting to have your point of view start in the third person, then change to you, like he's speaking directly to us, the reader, and then change to me, where it's all about me. So since you are trying to divide and classify all dogs, I'm not sure it's a good idea to talk about these 3 individual dogs. This makes it seem like you're just describing these 3 dogs instead of putting all dogs into 3 groups. So he decided that she was probably right. So he revised his paragraph, and we actually have it on slide 6. It was one of the first paragraphs that we talked about when we answered the questions towards the beginning. So his revised paragraph is this. A city walker will notice that most dogs fall into one of 3 categories. First, there are the big dogs, which are generally harmless and often downright friendly. They walk along peacefully with their masters, their tongues hanging out and big goofy grins on their faces. Apparently, they know they're too big to have anything to worry about, so why not be nice? Second are the spunky medium-sized dogs. When they see a stranger approaching, they go on alert. They prick up their ears, they raise their hackles, and they may growl a little deep in their throats. I can tear you up, they seem to be saying, but I won't if you behave yourself. Unless the walker leaps for their master's throat, these dogs usually won't do anything more than threaten. The third category is made up of the shivering, neurotic little yappers whose shrill barks could shatter glass and whose needle-like teeth are eager to sink into a friendly, outstretched hand. Walkers always wonder about these dogs. Don't they know that people who really wanted to squash them under their feet, if people really wanted, they could squash them under their feet like bugs? Apparently not, because of all the dogs a walker meets, these provide the most irritation. Such dogs are only one of the potential hazards that the city walker encounters. Right? So he took his peers' advice and he made it very clear what all 3 categories are. You know, the big dogs, what that means, the medium-sized dogs, what that means, and the small dogs and what that means. He gave specific examples of how that type of dog behaves, but he's not talking about one specific individual dog anymore. He has figured out a way to describe each type of dog in a general sense so that then we could take his classification criteria and use it to classify all different kinds of dogs that we come across, not just Lucy and the other dogs, right? So it ends up being a much more successful paragraph. When you go to start writing your paragraph, you want to free write for a little while. Try to come up with as much as you can. You may even have to free write to come up with a topic, period. Once you have a topic in mind, you then might need to free write a little bit more so you can come up with all the different aspects of that topic that you can think of. Right? So for example, if you are thinking of writing about types of students, write for 10 minutes and jot down everything that comes to your mind when you think about 3 types of students. Or maybe when you're writing, you're like, wow, I could actually classify this into like 5 or 6 types. Go ahead, go with it. You might need to make some decisions later on, but go ahead and just write down what's coming to mind. Then try asking yourself questions about the topic. So for example, if you're writing about those 3 types of students, you might ask questions like, how do these 3 types of students prepare for their classes? How many classes will each student take? What do the different kinds of students do during the semester? How long does each type of student spend studying, working, or playing? Which type of student has a job outside of school? Which type of student still gets money from mom and dad? Those sorts of things. Just any questions you can think of about types of students to get those ideas flowing. Select the details that best support the 3 categories, and you could go more than 3 if you absolutely need to, but this is just a paragraph, right? So you don't want to make it too long and involved. So try to stick to 3 categories if you can, and then number them in the order that you're going to present them in the paragraph. So what's the first category you're going to look at? What's the second category? What's the third category? And think about why you're putting them in that order. Is there a reason? Is there an order that makes more sense, think about that, right? Get that organization working in your head. Then come up with your topic sentence. College students can be classified into 3 categories. Boom. Right? Then each of your 3 categories, turn those into complete sentences as well. So the first category, or the first way that students can be classified is the partier, right? This type of college student really doesn't care about classes. They're just there to have a good time. They are often late to early morning classes if they show up at all. They're often found at the fraternity parties or the local campus bars, most nights of the week, something like that. But you turn each of those main points into a complete sentence, and then you're going to connect everything together, right? Put the draft away for a little while. I always tell students, take a break, walk away. Maybe you only have an hour to walk away because you're on a tight schedule and you got to get it turned in on time. Maybe you started working on it early enough where you can write that first draft and you can walk away from it for a day or two. Either way, take a break, come back to it, and then think about your organization again. Think about your categories and the examples you're giving. Look at your topic sentence. Look to make sure that you've used transition words to create cohesion in the paragraph. Do your final proofreading, right? You want to make sure, have I classified my topic into 3 distinct parts or 3 distinct categories? Is each of these parts based on the same principle of classification? Does my paragraph include a complete topic sentence and 3 supporting points or categories? While classifying my topic, have I also kept the subject unified? Have I stayed on topic? For instance, with the paragraph on dogs, in his first draft, or in actually his final draft, there was still a sentence that went off topic. Remember, it was the very last sentence where he mentions how city walkers need to protect themselves from the small dogs. But the paragraph isn't about protecting yourself from dogs. It's simply about the 3 categories of dogs. So make sure that the entire paragraph has stayed on topic. Have you backed up each category with enough strong, specific examples? Have you given enough examples for each section of the paragraph? And have I given them approximately equal attention? Have I devoted the same amount of time to each part? My phone is ringing again. Sorry about that. It never rings. For coherence, have I successfully categorized the types for my subject, the categories for my subject? Have I done that successfully? Have I used those transition words to move my reader, to guide my reader from one category to the next? And then look at your sentence skills. Have I used a consistent point of view? Have I used specific words rather than general words? Have I used concise wording as opposed to being too wordy? Have I combined my thoughts to create varied sentences, longer, more complex sentences, not just a bunch of short, choppy sentences? And have I carefully proofread for the spelling and grammar errors? If you can answer yes to all of those questions, we probably have a pretty solid paragraph, right? But just remember, what we want to make sure we have are 3 distinct categories in which to classify your subject. Be very clear, right? So if I'm dealing with fruit, I need to be very clear how I'm going to categorize it, right? If I'm dealing with movies, I have to be very clear how to classify movies. Have those categories and the criteria, the details, very clear for each category. Try to stick to 3. You need at least 3 so that you have a well-developed paragraph. But you don't really want more than 3 because then that's too much in the paragraph, right? because you want to develop each category successfully. And if you do that, adding more than 3 makes the paragraph really long. It's almost like you need to just turn it into an essay. But we're not ready for that yet. We're still doing paragraphs, right? If you have any questions about classification or any additional comments, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, you guys are free to move on to the next item in the weekly module.